Disclaimer, we're not Koreans. We don't speak Korean. So if there's any context that we might have missed based on the fact that we're not from Korea, that's why. Hello everyone, my name is Jason Ramirez and welcome to another episode of the Hit List Podcast, a podcast where me and a guest cross off films from our watch list and discuss them. This is Season 6, Episode 5, and today I'm joined by movie theater veteran Maria Alejandra, aka Maya. Welcome Maya, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get started, I have two questions for you. When you served your time during your movie theater experience, how many movies did you watch?
Oh, like weekly or in general, in total?
I want to know weekly now.
I would say if we were to average it all together, probably 1 to 2 films a week. I went all of the time. I also lived very close to the movie theater I worked at, so just about every film that came out. Sometimes we would do actually showing just for employees, film, like really, really big films. Because especially when big films come out, it's usually all hands on deck. And sometimes you don't actually get to see the movie, so you get spoilers. And then if you're cleaning the theater, you'll definitely see spoilers. And so to avoid that from staff, we would do a showing like a week before. Like as soon as we get the film, we'll show it, which is really cool. Like we saw Avengers Endgame on like Tuesday of before Thursday that it came out. So we were like, we already knew. We were in the know. But yeah, I watched films a lot, as much as I could.
That's really awesome. That was like in high school. That was one of the only jobs I wanted to get. Unfortunately, it just never happened, which even then I felt like, okay, y'all are messing around. Like, I don't know what you guys are on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my dog, by the way.
We have a guest appearance. The real star of the show.
Exactly. I know that's what you guys always hear. That's really cool. So I guess in general then, like, how many in total did you see in the movie theaters during your time there?
If I were to add them all up?
Yeah. Or did you see any repeats, actually? Did you see repeats a lot?
Not super often. But sometimes during my shifts, I hope my former bosses aren't listening, or maybe they are. But we do theater checks, right? When I was in management, to make sure that the film was playing correctly, there's no issues in the theater. So we would go in and out of different theaters. Sometimes I would stay a little bit longer in some, just to really make sure that the quality was good. People were enjoying their time. No, sometimes I would just sneak in there and be like, and then it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go. I'm working. So sometimes I would sneak in. I was like, oh, I like this part. So I'd like run over and I'd just watch a part and then I'd go back to work. But I think my favorite thing was we had a dinner theater at the theater we worked at. And so we often like made our own food in the restaurant and like brought it into whichever theater you wanted, which is really cool. And I guess plug for them, it was Royal Cinemas in Pooler. They now have the world's largest IMAX, which is pretty cool. That's in Pooler, Georgia in the United States. But it's really cool. It's huge. It's amazing. So would definitely recommend.
Yeah, I'm nowhere near Georgia. Well, I guess I'm on the East Coast, but still.
You're much closer than me. Way closer.
All right, so I guess my second question for you is, what's something about you that people would be surprised to know?
These questions are good. I'm ill-prepared for both of them. I guess I've been using this as an icebreaker recently. I learned to swim before I learned to walk when I was 8 months old.
Really?
Yeah. And I continued swimming for most of my youth, especially when I lived in Peru. And I was on a bunch of competitive teams. And my coach wanted to train me for the Olympics, but my parents, being cool and incredible as they are, didn't want to decide my life for me. So they didn't do that, which was really cool. But maybe in another life, in a parallel universe, I'm an Olympic swimmer somewhere, which would be pretty cool. But I love swimming. And the Olympic verse. Precisely. But yeah, so I love swimming. And although I don't competitively swim anymore, it's still one of my favorite things to do.
Wow, I never knew that. Like, I guess like two questions from that. Like, how did you live near a beach or something? or how did that come about that you learned to swim before you could walk?
Yeah, no, my mom, my dad actually put me in classes. And so my mom would take the class with me. And the easiest way really to teach a baby to hold their breaths is you blow on their face and you instinctively hold your breath. So that's when you dip them in and out. And so eventually it starts to connect that when they go in the water, they need to hold their breath. And the second important thing they teach you is to float, which honestly is pretty life-saving. If little babies can float, then that can save a lot of babies. So I actually haven't asked my parents exactly why they did that. I think they're just cool. So they were like, this makes sense. I don't know. I should definitely ask them. But I mean, I'm very grateful to them for not just throwing me in the pool and having to learn that way, which a lot of people do. So I'm very, very privileged and fortunate.
No, like they just gross. Like the way my parents raised me is like, oh, you'll learn it. They just expect me to like learn it by myself. I'm like,
try not to die.
Yeah, like, and then when I did that, we went to like a river. I went down the current, like I was like gonna die. I mean, like, oh shit, we had to go save him. I got punished for that. But like, listen, you didn't teach me, so like, if it's anyone's fault, it's kind of your fault.
Kind of is, yeah.
I was like what, 9, 10 when that happened, and I got in trouble for almost dying.
Poor thing.
That was really funny.
So, what a time. Get in trouble for I guess almost dying.
Second question is because do you still swim?
I do. I unfortunately live in Seattle where there's not really a lot of pools. They say they have beaches. They don't. It's a lie. They have lakes. The beaches are pretty far from here. And so I dream about swimming all of the time. But when I lived in Georgia, yes, all the time. We had a lake and a really nice pool. So I spent most of the year swimming at the pool. I did do synchronized swimming for a little bit. So that's another little factoid too. That is the most intense physical training I've ever endured in my whole life. Honestly, I don't think that synchronized swimmers get enough praise because they are incredible athletes and it's incredibly hard to do what they do. But it was really fun. It was really hard. I almost threw up, I think, the first day. I didn't. I was very proud of myself for that, but it was really, really intense.
Awesome. Well, I like that. I learned something about you today. That's why I like asking that question, because I learned some surprising things. Can I get a fun
factoid from you? Is that allowed?
Okay, because you asked. I had to take speech classes up until I was like 8 because I didn't know how to speak. And people are always surprised when they say like, "JC, you speak so much now." Yeah, I couldn't. I couldn't do it. Kind of
your whole thing. Yeah,
that's my whole thing. Exactly. It's one of the things I'm really good at.
That's really empowering, though. That's really cool.
I'm like Naruto in that way. He didn't know how to clone himself, and then he became one of the best.
I always have to sneak in all of our shows.
Yeah, it's great. What's crazy is that like I'm not even a big fan of Naruto. Like I tried reading it. I read some of the books, but like it got to a point where like they kept explaining the concept of like the magic more than like the action. And when the action happens, like I'll be like, oh, this is why it's so impactful. I'm like, okay, listen, I don't want to read this much for like a manga. That's like the reason I'm reading this manga is because I like seeing the pictures, and I just see a wall of text. Nah, I'm reading a regular book at this point. At least I'm not being deceived at that point.
It's kind of rough when manga panels have like so much text in it.
Yeah, for like a detective series like Case Closed, I can understand, you know, like it's a mystery. He's trying to solve it, and that was one of my main obsessions when I was younger, which is mystery, the mystery genre, like detective genre, and Case Closed was like the perfect link for that, between like manga and mystery. And I like the manga more for the anime because it was much more. Because it was in black and white, it was much more graphic than when you watch the anime.
Almost like
and it's
film noir feel.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there we go.
We've been, we've been learning Japanese, and my best friend is much better than I am. But we have the manga for One Piece in Japanese, so we've been like trying to translate it, which is a really fun activity. She's much better than I can't even claim that. But I get to reap the benefits of being her best friend and learning from her, honestly. But it's really fun.
I know ocha to gohan desu. That's it.
Right.
I've been learning it on Duolingo, you know.
Duolingo can get you somewhat far.
Yeah. Farther than I was
somewhere.
3 weeks ago. I know gohan means rice. You know,
It sure does. Or to
All
eat,
right.
depending on how you use it.
It's rice in my context.
It's rice, okay.
All right, so let's get to the actual topic of this film. Speaking of East movies taking place in the East and detectives, today we'll be discussing Svaha the Sixth Finger, which was released in 2019. Svaha the Sixth Finger is a 2019 South Korean mystery thriller film directed by Jang Jae-hyun. The film follows Pastor Park, the head of a religious investigation center that exposes cults and cult leaders. While looking into a suspicious new religion called Deer Mount, he slowly uncovers clues that connect this cult to a series of mysterious cases of missing teenage girls when a body is found inside a damaged tunnel beam. He begins to uncover dark secrets surrounding this cult and its enforcer, Nahan. This film was on Maya's list. Maya? Why?
I would say, in short, I've been watching a lot of Korean horror recently. And so I've read some articles about films that people recommend. And so this was one of them. And that's really as simple as why it was on my list.
So, like, when did you get into, like, Korean movies?
Korean horror specifically, or Korean? Because K-dramas, I mean, that has a long history. But I think I've been watching a lot of K-horror in the last year or so.
Okay.
I love how narratives are built in Korean films. It's very different, I would say, than Western films. I also think that some Korean films recently in the last few years have gotten a lot more international awareness, which is pretty cool. Like Parasite, I think, was a big one. I love the language too, since I'm learning. My language track right now is Japanese and then Korean. So it kind of fits into where I want to be able to watch without subtitles one day, which would be super cool. And eventually travel to Japan and to South Korea as well. So both things are on my language track and interest. And so it kind of coincides that I also love horror in general. And I think Korean horror is superior to a lot of other countries.
Okay. So I got into Korean movies a little while ago, even before Parasite. I don't want to say I'm an OG because like there was still like a niche audience for Korean based media before like K-pop really took off here. And even then there was like a dedicated audience of K-pop. And if you were on Twitter then, you knew like every popular tweet would have someone playing, "Oh my god, that's terrible." And it had like a fan edit of like their favorite K-pop star, and it was so annoying. You couldn't stop them. You couldn't stop them at all. But
you know what? They were doing the work, okay? That was hard to do at that time.
They were doing the user-generated content was working. They were putting in the work. Speaking as a fan myself of like certain like celebrities, I know the work it takes to like put in that work, the marketing. But a few years ago, I came upon this list of like some of the best movies from Korea. And one of the top ones was Old Boy. And people were like, don't read anything about it. It's a really good movie. And I saw like the hallway fight scene. I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. And I thought it was amazing, but I'm never going to watch it again because it is so fucked up. Have you seen Old Boy?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Let's just say, basically this man, he's kidnapped. And then he's held in a hotel room for years, basically like he's a prison of like someone else's design for years. He can't see his family. He doesn't know who's captured him. The only thing he has is like a TV, and that's it. So he learns how to box based on like watching boxing matches on the TV. And when he escapes, he fucks everyone up. And it's just so crazy based on like who did this to him and what was the motivation behind it and everything else that happens in the movie. I was like, what the hell? The other movie I saw was The Good, the Bad, the Weird, and I love that movie because it's it takes inspiration from the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, of Clint Eastwood, like spaghetti western. I saw that movie and I had the same reaction that the Chinese people have, or like China had when Kung Fu Panda came out, when they're like, how do they make a better movie about China than us? And I saw this movie, The Good, the Bad, the Weird. Like, how do they make a better spaghetti western than us? Even though spaghetti westerns were made by Italians, but you know what I mean. Like, how do they make a western better than the West? You know, I thought it was amazing and it was really good, and I always recommend that to people. It's that good. So I got into it like a few years ago, and
Nice.
the whole traction took off of Parasite, and I was excited to watch this movie because I do like mystery thriller films, especially when they deal with the occult and how to take them down, like how to investigation, that whole thing. But I do have my thoughts about this film, but I want to hear yours first. What did you think about this movie?
It's a good question. I guess that's the whole question, right, for this whole podcast. Okay, I will say that as far as it being scary, the scare factor, I didn't find it to be very scary.
Right.
Which is something that I love because I'm crazy. So in that part, I think usually Korean films are very good about actually being pretty terrifying. This one was not terrifying, but I think the subject matter or what is revealed in the film is horrifying. Like it is absolutely terrible. So it checks that box. In short, I liked it. There are some things I liked about it. I think it tried to take on too many narratives at the same time.
Right.
To where towards the end, when it all kind of came together, it wasn't as satisfying as it could have been.
Exactly.
You know,
I know
because it was a very big like, oh, but it wasn't as like my life. I reconsider everything. But I think it was just because it was too many narratives and they weren't well fleshed out as they could have been to been more impactful. But they're very important narratives to the story they're trying to tell. So I understand why, I would say. But also, it could have hit a little harder, I guess, is how I felt.
I feel the same way. And that's part of the reason why I didn't like it too much. And I've seen some criticism online, like this had the perfect potential to be like a miniseries because there's so many narratives, so many different characters involved in this film that try as they might, it couldn't all have been satisfying in one film. And then when the reveal happened, I'm like, oh, I mean, like you guys kind of like didn't mention that for like the whole film. You mentioned it once and then got over it.
Yeah.
Like the title of the film is Svaha, the sixth finger, and the sixth finger doesn't even come to play until like well after halfway throughout the movie. Like you don't even understand the context behind it unless like I guess you know about Buddhism, which I clearly don't. I was raised Christian, evangelical Christian, Protestant. I don't know anything about that. So so like the Christian symbolism I understood. But everything else regarding to like Hinduism, Buddhism, I don't know anything about. And when they made references to this, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm learning. But you know, with movies, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt when you're learning something new. You know,
that's true. Yeah, I definitely agree. It would have been a fantastic miniseries. Maybe like 12, 16 episodes would have been a perfect.
Not even that.
To like really.
It could have been shorter. It could have been like really impactful if they did like 8 episodes. You know, like why drag it out even more? Like. It was too much, but like you don't have to drag it out too much, you know. It could have been like True Detective, you know. Yeah. What stood out to you the most, though?
I would say that really a lot of the lines that Pastor Park says throughout the film are like really, really sad and really tragic.
Yeah.
I think hearing his perspective in little moments, like driving in the car with Joseph. And just talking about, like, God is alive, haha. Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
You know, and, like, telling his story. I think those little moments weren't meant to be super impactful, but I think they were. And his character is kind of interesting to me because he's kind of like a farce, you know, like himself, but also provides, like, a really interesting perspective to a very, like, heavily religious or like intense environments that the other characters are in, or he's kind of not, but he is at the same time intrinsically. So it's really interesting. But I think a lot of things that were said, there are certain lines, I wrote them down, that kind of stood out to me. They're like, wow, that's absolutely tragic, and really speaks to the humanity of things and how people, like the human condition in like a religious and not religious context. Like you can take these lines outside of a religious context and be like, wow, that's really sad.
Yeah. You know, growing up in a conservative household, you certainly get a lot of that, like when, especially like immigrant families in this country, like, you know, when a child grows up in this country as opposed to like being brought here, you kind of have like a perspective from both worlds of like ultra conservative immigrant family from struggling to work their way up, and then going to school and seeing like, I wouldn't say hedonistic, but like secular would be a better word, I think, of like how other families do their thing, you know. So it's like really seeing like both worlds, how like having different worldviews and stuff. And I guess I saw that in this film as well, when with in the beginning when the young girl, the 15-year-old twin, she's like praying with her aunt. Her aunt's like really passionate into it. She's like speaking in tongues basically, and the young girl, she's just like, you know, just going for the motions. She's just staying to prayer and just going for the motions of doing it. I'm like, yo, that's so relatable, because like I've done that, I've been that, and I've also seen that, and it's like I totally get that as well. Yeah. And this movie does, and then
like when she's in her room, she's just like listening to K-pop, like hanging out, like
because
she's
texting
a normal
someone,
teenager. Yeah, like
yeah. So it's very, it says a lot. Like the film like has commentary from like the perspective of the pastor Park, and also from the young girl who actually like supposedly lives with a demon and then just like doesn't really believe in it, or like just doesn't care in general. So it has like a lot of commentary on it.
I think so too. Yeah. I do want to mention, I absolutely adore the deaconess Sim, Pastor Park's like secretary-ish. She is so funny and I love her so much. I hope that both sides of her pillow are always cold. She was I thought that was like really nice, because it's a really heavy topic. And you can either go through a film keeping it really heavy and intense, or you can have someone like Deaconess Sim who just lines everything up, and for a second it's like I love her, she's so funny.
Like she says, oh, you should ask Dr. Goo. Who's that?
Dr. Goo.
Google. Ask Google.
Or whenever it's like, well, buy an air purifier. Amen. She got so excited. Listen, an air purifier makes a big difference.
I recently had to dig up our air purifier because of the whole haze thing, because of the Canadian fires.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
It made a huge difference, to be honest. But yeah,
it does. It gets really smoky here too, because of the wildfires.
Yeah.
So almost everyone has some sort of purifier. If you don't have an AC unit, you have an air purifier for sure.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put this in here as a timestamp as to like our date of recording. It's not enough to just say like what date we're recorded on, but like what's going on in the world as well, just to like understand, oh yeah, I remember when that happened, so like people don't forget or like remember. Just recently, a couple of days ago, we learned that the billionaires that went into the submarine to go view the Titanic imploded, and they didn't suffer because it takes 4 nanoseconds to register pain or like register visualization, and they died within 1 nanosecond. So and enough with the power of the sun and the ocean. So yeah,
honestly, it's pretty impressive that they were even able to recover anything, considering how hot that got. Like, and they used oh my gosh, they didn't use metal. They used like carbon fiberglass. Yeah, there's a reason why you don't use that, but yeah,
it's so stupid. I'm gonna make a quick snippet on this because like
please do.
Even though we have this movie topic, I want to talk about this real quick. How do you ignore experts on something that can kill you? Like, if you're gonna go in the sky, you want some regulation behind that, because you know people have died flying before. Multiple like the guidelines are written in blood. Basically, that's the whole thing, because people died doing this or doing that or doing this. And if you're going to go underwater, you kind of want to make sure the integrity of the structure won't collapse on you. Like, and even if it didn't implode, right, they still had no way to get out of it. So like if they were able to get up to the surface, right, as safely, I put this in quotes, safely as they could with the joystick that they had from what was it, Logitech?
The $30 Logitech. Not even a really good one.
Exactly. Like I'm surprised it wasn't like a Wildcat controller, you know?
Funny.
But like even if they were able to get there, there was no way for them to get out. The ocean is large. You can't see anything if you're just looking down. Like it just looks like a blip and that's it. So even if they're able to get up, it's like a white against blue. It's not like orange against blue, and there'd be no way for them to get out to get some air. So like
they really wouldn't have.
Imploding is like the best way to die. Unfortunately,
best case scenario. For
then
sure.
then the alternative like suffocating to death. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
That's very grim. We're talking about this while we're talking about the
I mean, I kind of, we're talking about grim stuff, but I would say that one of my best friends is really, really knowledgeable when it comes to the Titanic, and it's one of like their special interests. So everything that I know about this, I only know because of them. But I did learn yesterday that there was a 19-year-old there with his dad, and that he didn't want to be there, and his dad guilted him to be in there because of a Father's Day, because it was Father's Day, I think, when they went, or for a Father's Day thing. No. So it's really sad that he didn't want to be there. I will say that that piece of it is really awful. But, I mean, we can also speak to there are, migrants that are missing in the ocean, and no one's looking for them in the same way. So there's a lot to deep dive into. Eat the rich.
The Atlantic Ocean said yes.
So, we got you, boo.
Oh, man. I'm never going to get sponsors.
I mean, be a different crowd.
All right. So back into this film. Now that we know exactly what time we recorded this, there are like supernatural elements and like paranormal occurrences in this film. How do you think it enhances the storytelling or like takes away from the storytelling based on like the overall atmosphere of the film?
I initially felt that there could have been more. I think my only counter to myself that it could have been more is that the lack of seeing like very, very specific supernatural moments adds to the mystery of, wait, is this really real? Like, or is what they believe actually real? Or are they also being conned? Or like what? So I think it adds to that element of doubt, which I think was good. But I kind of wanted to see more. I'm not going to lie. I really did. But I think it was smart to use less in the perspective of keeping a mystery of, wait, what's happening? Who's right? Who's right, who's wrong, but like what belief is real exactly.
Yeah. So I kind of felt the same thing where in the beginning of the film, like, okay, what's really going on? Because like they keep her hidden away. You hear her crying at night, and they're like praying to like forgive for their sins, basically while they're keeping her alive. And I was just thinking like maybe it's like a twist at the end. I always thinking like I feel like movies that kind of ruin this, and like we kind of always expect like a twist, which I kind of wish they didn't do that as much. But I was like thinking like what's like really going on, and just the whole thing of like they did keep it grounded with Pastor Park saying like, oh, these guys are scamming, they're just doing it for money. He was talking to like the priest, and he was saying, well, you should take this one seriously because the other one started out as like a yoga group, and then eventually there was a gas attack that killed a lot of people, or like, so there's like that element of like him keeping it grounded because he knows a lot of these people are scammers, and I don't think he's ever experienced like anything like real before, like any real supernatural stuff, until the events of this film. And even then, he doesn't even meet the girl. He doesn't even meet her, the one that was kept hidden away. So that's kind of like what I was like really disappointed about. Like you say, you have all this build up, all this mystery behind what this girl looks like, and then eventually she just sheds away what she looks like, so you don't get a full look of her grown. And then you see her, and then she's like supposedly like the good one, like the enlightened one, and then she dies,
The
and I'm
light.
like, what?
Yeah.
I was really
know.
disappointed in that.
You know what it made me think of?
What?
It made me think of Hercules, in that she was born to destroy him, right? Because he was the snake. Okay, we're getting into spoilers, if that's okay.
That's fine.
I don't know
That's
if we're
fine.
supposed to mention that, but in that, like, her presence was only there to destroy him, and so everything that he did was to ensure that she never did, right?
Right.
But it was like, you know how he sent his two little gremlins to
Kill
kill
him.
Hercules?
Make him mortal.
I shouldn't have thought of that immediately, but I was like, hey, it's kind of like...
You know,
I didn't think of it when I was watching it, but yeah.
I was also like really distracted when I was watching this movie. I think that's kind of like what made me towards the opinion like I don't really care for this movie, but like after like reading about like, oh, that's what's supposed to be happening, I didn't catch that at all. You know, I'm not the most. I know I'm not the most brightest person. I'm not exactly like bright, but like I guess that should have been a little bit more obvious. I should have caught that. And even then, I'm like,
It wasn't
you know
obvious, though.
yeah, that's the thing, because like there's so many things going on, right? You think in the beginning of the film it's gonna be about the girl and her twin sister, but it's not. It's about a whole completely different other thing until the end when like you kind of see them but it just like they could have done Avatar, but better. The Last Airbender, I mean, not the masterpiece that
Yeah.
is James Cameron's Avatar, but
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
that's what confused me the most, because like she was supposed to be his destroyer, right? He built this whole religion based on destroying this child that could potentially destroy him. But why was she portrayed as evil? Like there were so many stuff that like bad omens that happened around her. Like when the neighbors like tried to go see who was in there, they got bit by snakes, right? Snakes came out of the room with the shed, and I was just overall confused as to like what the actual intention was, and I'm not sure if it really was executed well, because I didn't understand what was going on. I was intrigued nonetheless of like the story of not the storytelling, but the acting and the cinematography. But I was very confused all the way throughout.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I don't really know the answer, if I'm being honest, but the only thing that I picked up on was when the twin was talking to Nahun, and said something along the lines of, every time that you kill a girl, I'm the one that's crying with you. And then she like sang the song that we can assume his mom was singing to him at some point, and like soothing him and keeping the girls that he saw at night away. And there's a part of me that thinks that she looks that way because of what these boys are doing throughout that whole time. I don't know that that's true, but that's kind of what it felt like when she was talking. But that's such a powerful, like impactful connection that honestly Pastor Park being such a big focus in the film kind of took away from how like impactful that could have been. And I did see some commentary about Pastor Park being like a negative commentary, that he was like the only source of correctness or like righteousness even in the whole film, which is kind of like off, especially considering who his character was too, and maybe not completely fair. But I don't know. I think that I watched this film twice to like actually kind of pick up on what was happening, and I think the second time I watched it, in the end, is where I was like, oh, okay, I'm connecting the things together, and it's actually like kind of horrible and really, really, really tragic and sad.
Right.
But I think it's a patient watch. You have to be pretty patient, and engaged to really pick up on, because there's very, very tiny subtle things that they do from the beginning that the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, there he is. He's in the painting right there. Or like, there's that little thing. And I was like, oh, I didn't notice this at all. Which, I mean, I guess in watching films in general, you don't notice all the little like idiosyncrasies of like what's happening. But at the same time, you shouldn't have to do that to like really get what the film was about, or
Right.
really, really get the depth of these characters too. But I think that Nahan was like definitely became like the main character towards the half of the film. And I think he would have been a much more effective, complete main character for the story, because as tragic as the twins are, the way he was utilized to cause so much harm, and the way like they used these boys like on purpose, right? They took boys that had committed murder, who were broken in a lot of ways, and then like gave them a reason for living, which also included more murder, which is just the most horrifying thing you can think of. And like everything about his life was a lie. And I think like if he would have been the focus, I think the film would have been much more effective than Pastor Park being such a strong focus throughout.
Yeah. I know what you mean. And I was thinking this too, like two thoughts. Like whenever I see like an occult film, like investigating it, like what's going on, usually they're from the perspective of the police investigating them, and then along the way there'll be side characters like reporters who've been doing research for years or months before the cop got involved, and then like adding in more exposition into the story. But here it's kind of the opposite, where it's the investigator, like the independent reporters doing this, and then later on he meets the cop who's also investigating like these somewhat related cases, and then he gets information from him. And I thought it was gonna be like, oh, they're gonna team up together, but that didn't happen. The only way the police were used was to show their incompetency, and also to like reveal more information. So that's one thing I wish they could have done better, which it would have been done better if they just adapted this into a show. Like we're saying, it's a great concept, great people all around were involved with this, but it just wasn't executed very well. And the second thing is like with Pastor Park, I'm not sure about the actor's actual celebrity status, but I feel like he's really popular. This is like released a year before Squid Game, so I'm sure he's done this before, where he's kind of considered like a celebrity. Like I guess for us would be Chris Evans. I guess I'm guessing that's what he is in Korea.
He would love that comparison, I feel like.
If he's hearing this, you're welcome. But I guess he was there to like sell the movie, basically. Like that's why you see like a lot of movies these days are packed with celebrities. It's just to sell the movie. I think that's why he was there. So I'm not sure the original script for this. It could have involved him, but that's probably the reason why he's in this movie so much.
Yeah, I wonder. Because, I mean, there's a good amount of, like, really powerful actors that I'm not as certain of how their popularity or lack of is in Korea, but I've seen them in other stuff before. Like, Nahan's actor I've seen in other works, too. But I think that happens very often, right? When to drive a film, you use a popular actor, unfortunately, and maybe make their part bigger than it should be. Or it could have been written that way, like you said. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess for me, like when I was watching Korean shows for a hot second, I saw All of Us Are Dead, which is like on Netflix. It's like a zombie show, and really the woman from Squid Game is there. I'm like, oh, she's here, and then she's like a terrible human being. Like her character's so terrible. I'm like, oh, I wish she dies. Oh, she dies. Okay. Oh. But she took someone along with her. Like a couple people.
She did.
You see that one?
Yeah. Okay. I love it. It's so good. I think Korean films do zombies so well.
Oh, yeah.
Any zombie Korean film, I think, just is always so good. So that one's a really good one. I agree.
Speaking of like zombies, and makeup. What did you think of the makeup of the creatures here, or like the dead girls?
Yeah, her. I liked the way the veins like came in and out. That made her look so terrifying. But also, I don't. There was something so like calm about her demeanor and face that she simultaneously looked really scary, but also I felt calm seeing her. That's like a really weird way to feel, but I think it's maybe akin to her character in that you're not sure like what's happening. The whole film we've been thinking of her as a demon, right? Of this like horrifying thing, and then all of a sudden she's the light. Huh? Hold on, I'm confused.
I don't think you're the only one.
Yeah. But I thought it was really effective, at least, and it looked really cool the way the veinsies did the little vein thing.
For me, it's like it's also a specific shot that like left an impression on me. Is when Nahan is in his room, the red room, sleeping, and then like the girls are like haunting him, and they're like their makeup looks like they look like they're dead, like they're rotting corpses that have risen from the grave to haunt him as they're crawling down from the ceiling towards him, and kind of like loops around, like bird's eye view, loops down towards him, and then he wakes up and they're gone. And I was like, yo, that is scary. That's like not scary, but like that's very unsettling to see.
It is.
So I was like, is there more of that? Not really, but it was really good. And also the one that like I liked was like the car crash at the end when supposedly the guy was able to survive it, and then Nahan just like gets a lighter and just lights him on fire. I was like, yo, there we go.
Yep. That was a great scene. I will say I agree about the girls. I think the scenes where he was sleeping were two of the most effective and really showing how horrifying what these boys have done is. And I also really liked the one where you just see the girls hanging. Like you just see their legs, and that you see him like on his like mother's lap essentially. And like that's how he can keep going forward as a person, I guess. But it's just such a it's horrifying in two ways, right? Like one, especially like number one, the girls that are the real like true victims of everything that has happened. And then him, right? Because he's also a victim himself, as also being a perpetrator and a victim. I think that perspective is it's such a powerful and impactful perspective to have in films and storytelling in general, because it's such a complex character, and you can't just say like yes or no. Like it's really hard. You have a lot of emotions around how you should feel about a character like that. But in that moment, seeing him so like raw and vulnerable and terrified, and like leaning into the smallest thing that he possibly could, and it was like his mother's voice and singing, and then you see like the repercussions of what he's done like hanging over him essentially is just so tragic and awful, but also really, really powerful.
I get the sense that like I can understand it too, but like I didn't have too much sympathy for him. Like at the end of the day, he still did those things, right?
Yeah,
like he
absolutely.
he felt guilt, but like still heavily believed in his faith that was instilled, like brainwashed into him, but he still did it. And yeah, it was hard for me.
Pastor Park said that, right? At one point when the detective was pulling up his case, and she was like, I kind of feel bad for him. And then he was like, he does not deserve your pity.
Exactly.
And that's true. He doesn't deserve pity. But you can't take out the fact of like what these people, like the institution they built specifically to exploit these boys to commit murder.
Yeah.
And that is like hard to reconcile with what they did.
Yeah, so there is some commentary, not commentary, but criticism about this film, which I'm going to read from this article from the Decider.com. Basically, the premise of the article is like, should you stream it or skip it? Because, you know, it was released on Netflix. And fun fact, I had to subscribe to Netflix again to watch this movie.
Oh my gosh, I had to do that too. I was so mad.
If I could rent it on Amazon Prime, I would have done that. You know, like $3 just to rent it and just like don't even worry about it. No, I had to get Netflix, and I had to like justify.
We should have communicated, because then one of us could have done it And then we could just share the account.
Even then,
I had to
like,
do the same.
they're cracking down on that now. So, like, you can't even do that anymore.
Oh, that's right. Well, you can say that you're traveling for like a week or two, because that's what I did. Because my family and I share one, so then I just said I was traveling until it ran out, and
Yeah,
it was really rough.
We should have been better at this.
You should.
Okay, so basically, here's their take on it. Who wrote this again? It was John Serba, a freelance writer. He said, "Our take: Director Jang Jae-hyun clearly wants to impress us with his eager artistic vision, and there's nothing wrong with that. Svaha is thematically provocative and visually inspired, and Jung wants to stir up coexistation on spirituality and religion as much as he wants to disturb us. It's easy to admire his work and feel spellbound by his rigorously conceived imagery. Yet the plot is cluttered with superfluous detail, muddying its intent. Zhang struggles to balance the intimacy of a character-driven story with big, broad questions about the role of spirituality and myth in our lives. The movie also has enough characters to populate a prestige TV series, and Zhang adds and drops them regularly. Its density isn't an asset, at least on first watch. A second viewing may be revelatory, but I'm not sure if we'd be up to the task." And at the end of the day, at the end of the article, he says, "What's our determination? What's our deliberation? I guess a better word. Stream it or skip it. Stream it." I don't agree with that, but like I agree with what he's saying right here. It's very ambitious. It's very artistic, but there's just too much going on that it just doesn't make sense too much. Like that's what we were saying. Like we like the art behind it, but it could have been done better.
That comment did not make me think of this, but it just popped in my brain. Do you remember that scene where she found a bunch of cash?
Yeah.
And her grandparents. What did that have to? That stuck. Like, and also how her grandparents just like weren't there anymore. Like halfway through the film, they just weren't at the, like, where'd they go? Are they okay? Did they die? That nothing was insinuated to anything at all with them, and then there was just like a bunch of cash, and I'm like, wait, why did we have that there? What was the point of that? I'm so confused. I don't know. It just popped in my brain though. There's just like little moments that I think they could have used a lot smarter. Maybe there is a reason for that, but it's not very clear.
No.
But I did look up. I was curious of what Svaha means. Did you look it up too? Is that?
Yeah, I saw on the Wikipedia article that it means something, but I tried to look it up. Like, what does it mean exactly? I think it's like a deity or something. Let me see.
What I found is that in the Tibetan language, it means "so be it." Which, and it generally can be translated to like "well said," which is very close to like the Christian "Amen."
Right.
Which I think it's an interesting title that is not obvious unless you look it up. Or I guess if you're familiar with, I think it's used more in Buddhism to be "so be it" specifically.
Yeah. I also see on Wikipedia it's also a Hindu goddess of sacrifices featured in the Vedas. She's the consort of Agni and daughter of either Daksha or Brihaspati, depending on the literary tradition. It's just crazy to me. Like I had like my own context of like what my own like the myths I grew up reading are, and there's like still a whole world out there of all the myths. Like I grew up reading like Greek and Roman myths because I was a huge Percy Jackson fan. And I would like read lore behind, not just Percy Jackson lore, but like I would actually read the myths, and I thought they were really interesting. And there's more beyond that,
Yeah. I think what they did well, and I only really noticed this the second time I watched it, was they did a lot of subtle and not subtle symbolism, which is pretty cool. The not subtle one, like the giant elephant just hanging in this man's house. That was such a like, why do you have an elephant? I'm still not entirely sure why he has an elephant. I know
especially
they have like
out
the whole
in the mountains in the cold.
That poor elephant.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the bit about how Indian monks would give elephants to kings so that they can look into their eyes, and if they felt fear, like reflective of your heart and why doesn't Nahan fear the elephant? It could have been stronger if it was 2 episodes about why the elephant is there.
Right.
I know. But it was just, they used a lot of animals, right? In symbolism, the deer, which is a very common, like, there's like very subtle moments of mentioning purity and light, innocence, forgiveness. But I don't know that it was, I think it could have been more effective too, right? Because there's a snake that's evil, the deer that's innocent, or deers with good hearts, I think is what they call themselves in the sanctuary. So it's just so manipulative, in the, like, so intentionally manipulative of people's, like, belief, I guess, because people that went to these sanctuaries, like, very much believed what they're being told, and, you know, seemed to find community in that, which is kind of sad to see, considering, like, the context of, like, why they were there and what they were really, what the intention, what the agenda was.
Right.
Which I think is a common conversation around any occult or any extreme religious group or esoteric religious group, even if it's small.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all we can discuss about, like, our thoughts in it. But right after this break, we're going to talk about the production of this film. And now onto the production of this film. So I didn't get too much information as I usually do, because this film was relatively recently released, and it being a Korean movie, I couldn't find a lot of information. If you guys remember from my Memories of Murder episode, I did my best to find as much information as I could, but most of the stuff either isn't translated to English or just doesn't exist as much as I wanted to. But here's what I could find. So production, 90% of the scenes were shot on location, despite the cold reaching 20 degrees below zero in some areas. And there was a production team devoted to 90% of shooting an entire location of the Gangwon-do province with the mountainous areas in South Korea. And cinematographer Kim Tae-so created a blue-based water as a base to create, like, a cool toned cinematic atmosphere while preserving the cold tones for the season of winter. And the camera movements and shooting styles are just there to emphasize, like, express the tension, which is later increased by more close-ups in the second half of the film. That was all I could find until I went on IMDb and learned that the special makeup effects artist one of them is, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Hwang Hyo-kun. He's the founder and CEO of the technical art studio Cell, South Korea's leading special effects and makeup company, which he started in 2003. And he's worked on special effects and props and makeup on hundreds of films and TV shows, including, you might have heard of these, you might not have, Train to Busan, Okja, and Parasite. So I was like, okay, so they got really talented people up in here.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all the information I could find.
That sounds right. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think the production of it was really wonderful. I mean, it was very, very, very visually striking the whole time, especially the one scenes we talked about in the room with Nahan.
Yeah. And I'm really sorry. Like, this is like a huge contrast to, like, how I usually, like, my Titanic episode was really in depth. Like, I'm a huge fan of James Cameron. And I feel like it's kind of fitting, like, this mentioned the Titanic, now that we just talked about the submarine, but, like, I did a lot of research in that film, and I guess the reason why there's so much research available is because it did so well that it kind of changed the course of, like, cinema after that. Like, he kind of just shaped the landscape for it, and like, it was like #1 grossing movie for a while there until Endgame or whatever. And people were like, yo, they made James Cameron. Like, and I'm always like, listen, he did that with one movie. How many movies did it take? How many superhero movies did it take for Avengers to reach up there? Quite a few. And what did James Cameron do? He did it with one. And the only time he got beat was by himself. He beat himself with Avatar. And he did it with one. Right? So I'm a James Cameron stan. I'll always stand with this. Like, people who bash Avatar, like, oh, like, it's not even culturally relevant anymore. Like, you know, what do you mean culturally relevant? You forgot about Ant-Man the second it came out. That's just Ant-Man. Me going off. You say you like Ant-Man?
No, I said I forgot about Ant-Man.
Exactly. And there we go. How is it? It's not culturally relevant anymore, is it? And it just came out like 3 months ago.
Oh, I didn't see it, so I guess that's part of it.
I didn't either. It wasn't a necessary one. That's just me bashing Marvel again. I feel like that's everything that we could discuss about this film. Is there anything else you want to discuss that you want to talk about but didn't get a chance to?
I loved the bingo from the monks whenever they were like,
Bingo.
yeah, it's that bingo. I'm like, I don't know. I think I would say that after watching it a second time and like understanding the bits that didn't make a lot of sense to me, I liked it more. And I sometimes wonder if there's pieces that isn't as clear because of the language difference and like reading subtitles and versus like understanding the language. I think that could also be a piece. So sometimes watching it the second time, I was like, was I being overly critical? And I still believe like what we talked about, but I do think that it probably is a different experience watching it in Korean. So for Korean viewers, that might be different. And it might have hit home in ways that it didn't hit for us. So that's one piece I try to think about with foreign films and in different languages and how that can have an impact or could not. I don't know, right? Since I don't speak Korean. But I wonder if that was a piece to it or not. So if you watch it, maybe watch it twice. Because then maybe that's where it will really like fully hit. But I think it's a conversation worth having, and it's a conversation we have all the time, right? Of like light versus dark, the connectedness between them, you know, where is God? Is God alive? Is there a God? Is there no God? I mean, these are very human questions that we talk about a lot, and the way this was presented, I think at the end it like really hit of like, wow, this is so devastating and this is so tragic and sad. So I think there's more good to it than when I first watched it. So if you're really interested, you should watch it twice. That's my recommendation.
So that concludes our conversation today. Thank you so much, Maya, for being here. I really appreciate you talking about this film with me, as well as like other subjects that came up along the way.
Thank you for having me. It was super fun.
So I had to ask you, was Svaha a hit or a miss with you?
I guess that's an important question. It hit in the second viewing. I think that's fair to say. I hope. Yeah, I think that's the best answer I can have because I like it. I do. It just took a little bit to get there, and it could be the cultural piece, which I would really love to see like someone who's Korean and their perspective on this film. I think would be really interesting. But it hit in the second viewing. Yeah. Take that as you will.
For me, I'm going to say, unfortunately, it's a miss. Like my own like watching philosophy is like, if I don't understand anything the first time around and I'm doing my best to stay focused and I don't understand anything, I don't like it, you know? Because I've seen plenty of other films where like you don't need any other context besides what's going on in the movie and you'll like it. Like, for example, Roaring Currents, which the only thing I learned about it was like it's about an admiral, a Korean admiral who had 13 ships going up against 200 Japanese ships, and they survive. I'm like, oh, that's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. And it shows how they won, how they survived and how they won. And yeah, so I really wanted to like this. I like I said, I'm a huge fan of mystery thrillers, huge fan of like investigating the cult. I just wasn't. It just didn't hit for me. I think
that's fair.
I said it many times in this one. It would have been better if it were like a short miniseries, which I agree. I'm pretty sure Netflix just distributed the movie, but they could also like adapt it into like a miniseries, as long as it's a Korean miniseries, not like an American one they remake. No.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what I thought about it. So, Maya, you got anything to promote? Any?
No, but take care of yourselves. Focus on yourselves. Mental health is important. That would be my biggest plug, is to take good care. All right. And do fun things. Do what brings you joy, what makes you happy. There's nothing wrong in that, and I don't think people do it enough. We don't seek joy and happiness enough, so Be happy. Take care of yourself. Drink water.
My cup's empty, so.
Drink more water.
Okay.
Feel free to follow me if you want to see cosplay content and what I eat, I guess, and my dogs. And
Drop the IG.
what is it?
Oh, what is it?
At Mariale, I think it is. So ATMARIALE.
It's literally like at Maria Le, so it's AT Maria Le LE.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know, but that's I'm not trying to say at. I'm saying my last names.
Ah, I thought you were being funny with it. You could have just had it like that. I would have forever thought you were cool and punny and stuff. But it's
I'm like, not cool anymore. It's both. It is still a pun. It just has more meaning behind it than you would think it does.
All right, so that's it for today, folks. You've been listening to the Hit List Podcast. This was Season 6, Episode 5. And until next time, cross off a new film from your list.
Woo!
Just keep waving. Okay. There we go.